Crash landing. The vast emptiness of space shattered as a sleek vessel burst through the upper atmosphere of the uncharted planet. Flames licked at its hull as it plummeted towards the barren landscape below, leaving a trail of smoke and debris in its wake. Inside the cockpit, alarms blared and displays flashed urgent warnings as the pilot, Zara, fought desperately to regain control. Zara was a seasoned scout for the Galactic Confederation, tasked with exploring the fringes of known space. Her people, the Novanians, prided themselves on their advanced technology and spacefaring capabilities. But now, as her ship spiraled towards certain doom, none of that seemed to matter. Come on, Zara muttered through gritted teeth, her four-fingered hands dancing across the flickering control panel. The ship's eye had gone offline, leaving her to manually navigate the rapidly approaching terrain. Through the cracked view screen, she could make out jagged mountains and vast, dusty plains. With a bone-jarring impact, the ship slammed into the ground, carving a deep furrow into the alien soil. Zara was thrown from her seat, her slender body crashing against the bulkhead. Pain exploded through her, and she felt something snap in her chest. As the ship finally skidded to a halt, darkness closed in around her. Miles away, the crash had not gone unnoticed. Jake Morrison, a human explorer and xenobotanist, looked up from his makeshift camp to see the fireballs streaking across the sky. His eyes widened as he watched it disappear behind a distant ridge. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered, reaching for his pack. Jake had been stranded on this desolate world for months, his own ship damaged beyond repair by a surprise meteor strike. He'd been surviving on his wits and the sparse resources the planet had to offer, always hoping for a chance at rescue. This could be it, he thought. Whatever, or whoever, was in that ship might be his ticket off this rock. Jake set out immediately, his years of survival training kicking in as he navigated the treacherous terrain. The twin suns beat down mercilessly, but he pressed on, driven by curiosity and hope. As he crested the final ridge, he saw the crash site spread out before him, a deep gorge in the earth, ending in a crumpled mass of metal and polymer. Approaching cautiously, Jake scanned for any signs of life. The ship was unlike anything he'd ever seen, clearly of alien origin. Its design was sleek and organic, almost like a living creature. As he drew closer, he noticed a faint shimmer in the air around the wreckage, some kind of energy field. "Hello," Jake called out, his voice sounding small in the vast emptiness. "Anyone alive in there?" A weak groan answered him, barely audible over the creaking of cooling metal. Jake's heart raced as he searched for a way in. He found a tear in the hull and carefully squeezed through, mindful of the jagged edges. Inside, the air was thick with acrid smoke. Jake pulled a filter mask over his face and activated his wrist-mounted flashlight. The beam cut through the gloom, revealing a scene of destruction. And there, slumped against a shattered control panel, was a figure. Jake approached slowly, his breath catching in his throat. The being before him was clearly alien, humanoid in general shape, but with striking differences. Its skin was a pale lavender, with intricate patterns that seemed to shimmer and shift. Forearms ended in delicate, four-fingered hands. A crest of feather-like sensory organs adorned its head, and it was badly wounded. "Hey there," Jake said softly, kneeling beside the alien. "Can you understand me?" The alien's eyes fluttered open, 3 of them, arranged in a triangle. They focused on Jake with obvious effort. H-human. "It," she, rasped, her voice melodic even in its weakness. Jake nodded, surprised. "That's right. I'm Jake. Can you tell me your name?" "Zara," she managed, before a fit of coughing racked her body. Jake noticed a viscous silver fluid, blood, seeping from several wounds. "Okay, Zara," Jake said, slipping into crisis mode. "I'm going to get you out of here. Can you move?" Zara tried to shift but cried out in pain. "Broken," she gasped. "Internal injuries." As the medical treatments began to take effect, Zara seemed to regain some strength. She looked at Jake with a mix of curiosity and gratitude. "Why? Help me," she asked. Jake paused, considering the question. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said simply. "And because out here, we've got to stick together. Human, Novanian, doesn't matter. We're both a long way from home." Zara nodded slowly, a look of understanding passing between them. But before she could respond, a distant rumble caught their attention. Jake scrambled to the edge of the overhang, peering out across the plain. His heart sank as he saw a massive ship descending from the clouds, heading straight for the crash site. "Zara," he said urgently, "is that your people coming to rescue you?" The alien's eyes widened in fear. "No," she whispered. "Cracks, scavengers, slavers, they must have detected the crash." Jake's mind raced. They were in no condition to run, and he had no weapons that could stand up to whatever the cracks might bring. But he'd be damned if he was going to let these aliens take Zara, or himself, without a fight. "Okay," he said, his voice steady despite the fear churning in his gut. "Then we've got work to do. Think you're up for a little ingenuity, Zara?" The alien met his gaze, a spark of determination shining in her eyes. "What did you have in mind, human?" As the Crack's ship touched down near the wreckage, Jake and Zara huddled in their hidden shelter, preparing for a confrontation that would test the limits of their newfound alliance. The real challenge was just beginning. Uneasy alliance. The Crack's ship loomed over the crash site, its hulking form a stark contrast to the sleek lines of Zara's downed scout vessel. Jake watched from their hidden vantage point as a boarding ramp descended, disgorging a group of heavily armed figures. "Ugly bunch, aren't they?" Jake muttered, peering through a pair of compact binoculars. Zara, propped up against the rock wall, managed a weak smile. "The Cracks, value function over form," she said, her voice stronger now thanks to the medical treatments but still strained. "Those exoskeletons allow them to survive in various environments." Jake nodded, studying the aliens as they began to pick through the wreckage. The Cracks were bulky, their natural forms hidden beneath mechanized suits that whirred and clamped with each movement. Multiple limbs extended from their central body, each ending in an array of tools or weapons. "Okay," Jake said, turning back to Zara. "We need a plan. Those guys look like they could tear us apart without breaking a sweat." Zara's eyes narrowed in concentration. "We need to disable their ship," she said, "cut off their escape, and their ability to call for reinforcements." Jake raised an eyebrow. "Great idea, but how exactly do we do that? I'm fresh out of EMP grenades." The Novanian's lips quirked in what Jake was beginning to recognize as amusement. "Your humor is refreshing human, but we may not need such crude methods." She gestured weakly towards the alien medkit. "The scanner, it can be repurposed." Jake's eyes widened as he began to understand. "You're saying we can use your medical tech to take out their ship? Now that's what I call thinking outside the box." Working quickly, Jake followed Zara's instructions to modify the scanner. The device's internal components were reconfigured, transforming it from a medical tool into a short-range energy disruptor. It wouldn't have much range, but if they could get close enough to the Crack's ship, it might just do the trick. "All right," Jake said, pocketing the modified scanner. "I'll sneak down there and plant this on their ship. You stay here and—" "No," Zara interrupted, struggling to sit up straighter. "We go, together." Jake shook his head. "You're in no condition to." "I know Crack's tech," Zara insisted. "Can guide you, and two have better chance than one." Jake wanted to argue, but he could see the determination in Zara's eyes. And she had a point. Her knowledge could be crucial. "Fine," he sighed. "But you lean on me, got it?" "No heroics," Zara nodded, and Jake helped her to her feet. They made their way slowly down the rocky slope, using the terrain for cover. Jake's heart pounded in his chest, acutely aware of how exposed they were. One wrong move, one bit of bad luck, and they'd be spotted. As they neared the Crack's ship, Jake could hear the aliens communicating in a series of guttural clicks and whistles. He glanced at Zara, seeing the tension in her face. "You understand them," he whispered. Zara nodded grimly. "They're discussing how to strip my ship, and debating our value as slaves." Jake's jaw clenched. "Not gonna happen," he muttered. "Okay, we're almost there. Where do we plant this thing?" Zara pointed to a panel near the base of the ship. "There, it houses primary power distribution." Nodding, Jake helped Zara into the shadow of the massive vessel. He reached for the panel, but Zara stopped him. "Wait," she whispered. "Security measures. Let me." With trembling hands, Zara manipulated a series of hidden controls. There was a soft click, and the panel slid open. "Now," she said, quickly. Jake placed the modified scanner inside, nestling it among a tangle of alien circuitry. He closed the panel just as a harsh voice rang out. "Intruders, by the ship." "Time to go," Jake said, scooping Zara into his arms. He sprinted away from the ship, zigzagging to avoid the energy blasts that began to pepper the ground around them. They had almost reached the relative safety of the rocky terrain when Jake felt a searing pain in his leg. He stumbled, nearly dropping Zara, but managed to keep his footing. Gritting his teeth against the pain, he pressed on. They collapsed behind a large boulder, both gasping for breath. Jake glanced down at his leg, wincing at the sight of the scorched flesh. "Well," he panted, "that could have gone better." Zara's eyes were wide with concern. "You're injured," she said, reaching for the wound. Jake waved her off. "I'll live. Did it work?" As an answer, a low rumble emanated from the Crack's ship. The sound built to a crescendo, and then silence. The constant hum of the ship's systems, which Jake hadn't even realized he'd been hearing, was gone. "I'd say that's a yes," Jake grinned. But their victory was short-lived. An enraged roar echoed across the plain, followed by the sound of heavy footsteps approaching their position. "They're coming," Zara said, fear evident in her voice. "We need a weapon." Jake looked around frantically, his eyes landing on a jagged piece of metal, debris from Zara's crash. He snatched it up, testing its weight. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. "Okay," he said, positioning himself in front of Zara. "When they come around that rock, I'll try to take them by surprise. You make a run for it." Zara shook her head. "No, we face this together." Before Jake could argue, the first cracks rounded the boulder. Its exoskeleton whirred as multiple limbs raised, each bearing a deadly-looking weapon. Jake tensed, ready to spring into action, knowing their chances were slim. But then something unexpected happened. The cracks faltered, its weapons lowering slightly. It made a series of rapid clicks and whistles, its head tilting in what seemed like confusion. And then Zara spoke, not in English or her native tongue, but in the harsh language of the cracks. Jake watched in amazement as she conversed with the alien, her voice growing stronger with each exchange. Finally, Zara turned to Jake. "They're not here to harm us," she said, disbelief evident in her voice. "What?" Jake said, not lowering his makeshift weapon. "But you said they were slavers, scavengers." Zara nodded. "They were. But things have changed. They say they're here to help." Over the next hour, a strange alliance began to form. The Cracks, it turned out, had undergone a societal shift in recent years. A new leadership had steered them away from their predatory past, encouraging them to use their skills for rescue and salvage operations instead. They had detected Zara's crash and come to offer assistance, not to capture or exploit them. The tension of the standoff slowly dissipated as both sides shared their stories. Jake's improvised weapon was discarded, replaced by medical supplies as the Cracks tended to his injured leg. As dusk fell, they all sat around a makeshift campfire, the flames casting flickering shadows on the alien landscape. Jake found himself studying the Cracks with new eyes, seeing past their intimidating exoskeletons to the beings beneath. "So," he said, addressing the Cracks leader, a grizzled veteran named Grax. "What happens now? Can you get us off this rock?" Grax's exoskeleton whirred as he turned to face Jake. Through the translator Zara had provided, his gravelly voice came through clearly. "Our ship is damaged," he said. "Your device was most effective. It will take time to repair." Jake winced. "Sorry about that. We thought you were, well..." "Our reputation precedes us," Grax said, a note of what might have been sadness in his voice. "It will take time to change how the galaxy sees us, but we are trying." Zara, who had been quiet for some time, spoke up. "Perhaps we can help each other," she said. "I am a scout, an explorer. Jake is a scientist. We have skills that could be of use." Grax's multiple eyes blinked in consideration. "And what would you ask in return?" "Safe passage," Jake said quickly. "For both of us, to wherever we want to go." The Crack's leader was silent for a long moment. Then, with a series of clicks that the translator rendered as a chuckle, he extended a limb towards Jake. "You have a deal, O human, and you, Novanian, welcome aboard." As Jake shook the alien appendage, he couldn't help but marvel at the strange turns his life had taken. Stranded on an alien world, rescuing a crashed alien scout, forming an alliance with former space pirates, it was all a bit much to take in. He glanced at Zara, seeing his own mix of exhaustion and excitement mirrored in her 3 eyes. They had a long road ahead of them, full of unknowns and potential dangers. But somehow, having faced death together and come out the other side, Jake felt ready for whatever the universe might throw at them next. As the twin suns of the alien world set, casting the landscape in an ethereal purple glow, Jake allowed himself a moment of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this unlikely band of misfits could forge something new out here on the fringes of known space. A partnership, an understanding between different species that could ripple out across the stars so it begins. The following days were a flurry of activity as the motley crew worked to repair the Crack's ship. Jake found himself constantly amazed by the ingenuity of his alien companions. The Cracks, with their multi-limbed exoskeletons, could perform feats of engineering that would have taken a human team weeks to accomplish. Zara, though still weakened from her injuries, proved invaluable. Her knowledge of advanced technology bridged the gap between Jake's more primitive understanding and the Cracks' specialized expertise. Together, they made steady progress, cannibalizing parts from Zara's wrecked scout ship to patch up the larger Cracks vessel. As they worked, Jake and Zara grew closer. The shared ordeal of the crash and their subsequent alliance had forged a bond between them, one that transcended their obvious physical differences. Jake found himself captivated by Zara's stories of her explorations, of distant worlds and civilizations he could scarcely imagine. "So, your people, the Novanians," Jake said one evening as they took a break from repairs. "What are they like? I mean, beyond the whole advanced spacefaring civilization bit." Zara's expression turned wistful, her feather-like sensory crests rippling slightly. "We are seekers," she said, "of knowledge, of understanding. Our society values discovery above all else. It's why we send scouts like me to the farthest reaches of space." Jake nodded, fascinated. "Sounds like my kind of people. But then, why were you so afraid when you thought the Cracks were coming to find you? Surely your people would have sent a rescue party." A shadow passed over Zara's features. "It's complicated," she said softly. "My mission, it wasn't entirely sanctioned. I was pushing beyond our agreed-upon boundaries. If I had been discovered," she trailed off, leaving the implications hanging in the air. Before Jake could press further, Grax approached, his exoskeleton whirring softly. "We have a problem," the Crack's leader announced, his translated voice grave. Jake and Zara exchanged worried glances. "What kind of problem?" Jake asked, already dreading the answer. Grax's multiple eyes blinked in rapid succession, a sign Jake had come to recognize as agitation. "We've detected a ship entering the system. It's Novanian." Zara's already pale lavender skin seemed to lose all color. "No," she whispered. "They can't have found me so quickly." Jake's mind raced. Could it be a rescue party? Maybe they picked up your distress signal. Zara shook her head vehemently. No rescue party, not for me. They're here to contain the situation. The gravity of her words sank in. Whatever Zara had been doing out here, her people were willing to go to great lengths to keep it quiet. And now, they were all caught in the middle of it. How long do we have? Jake asked Grax. The Crax leader's exoskeleton shifted, adjusting to the tension in his body. At their current speed, less than a planetary rotation, we're in no condition to outrun them. Jake ran a hand through his unkempt hair, mind working furiously. Then we need to hide. Make it look like we were never here. Zara nodded, her initial shock giving way to determination. We can use the wreckage of my ship. Scatter it, make it look like it burned up completely on entry. And what about us? Jake asked. Where do we go? Grax stepped forward, his massive form casting a shadow over the two of them. There are extensive cave systems not far from here. My people used to use them for less savory operations. They're shielded from most scans. Jake couldn't help but smile grimly. From pirate dens to fugitive hideouts. Guess some things never change, huh? The next hours were a blur of frantic activity. The Crax, with their incredible strength and multiple limbs, tore apart what remained of Zara's ship, scattering the debris across a wide area. Jake and Zara worked to erase any signs of their campsite, using the Crax ship's advanced systems to mask their heat signatures and other telltale signs of their presence. As the twin suns began to set, casting long shadows across the barren landscape, they made their way to the cave system Grax had mentioned. The entrance was hidden behind an outcropping of rocks, barely visible unless you knew exactly where to look. Inside, the caves were a maze of twisting tunnels and vast chambers. Strange, bioluminescent fungi cast an eerie blue glow over everything, providing just enough light to navigate by. The air was cool and damp, a stark contrast to the arid heat outside. Cozy, Jake muttered as they set up a makeshift camp in one of the larger caverns. Reminds me of some of the less reputable bars I've been in. Zara managed a weak smile at his attempt at humor, but her eyes were distant, troubled. Jake moved closer to her, lowering his voice. Hey, you okay? I mean, I know you're not okay, but do you want to talk about it? For a moment, he thought she might brush him off, but then she sighed, her entire body seeming to deflate. I've put you all in danger, she said softly. You, the Crax, you should never have been involved in this. Jake shrugged. Where I see it, we were all in danger anyway. Stranded on a hostile planet, remember? At least now we're in it together. Zara looked at him, her three eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and something else, something Jake couldn't quite identify. You don't even know what it is, she said. What I've done. So tell me, Jake said simply. Zara was quiet for a long moment, her gaze fixed on the glowing fungi that dotted the cave walls. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I discovered something that could change everything. Jake waited patiently, sensing the weight of her words. Our long-range scans picked up an anomaly, Zara continued. A planet hidden behind a dense nebula. It shouldn't have been there, but it was. And on that planet, she trailed off, seeming to struggle with the words. What? Jake prompted gently. What did you find? Zara's eyes met his, and the intensity in them took his breath away. Life, she said, but not just any life. Advanced life. A civilization that rivals our own, maybe even surpasses it. But they're hidden. Isolated. They've never made contact with the wider galaxy. Jake's mind reeled at the implications. And your people, they don't want anyone to know about this civilization. Zara nodded grimly. The Council believes that contact could be destabilizing. They wanted to observe from afar, to study without interfering. But I couldn't just watch. I believed we had a duty to make contact, to share knowledge, to learn from each other. So you went rogue, Jake said, understanding dawning. You were on your way to make first contact when you crashed here. Yes, Zara admitted. And now my people will do anything to stop me, to keep the secret. The weight of her revelation hung heavy in the air between them. Jake's mind raced with the implications. An unknown civilization, advanced enough to rival the space-faring races he'd encountered. It was almost too much to comprehend. Before he could respond, Grax's voice echoed through the cavern. "They're here," the Krax leader announced, his tone urgent. "A Novanian ship has entered orbit." Jake and Zara rushed to join Grax at the cave entrance. Through a narrow fissure in the rock, they could see a sliver of the night sky. And there, descending through the atmosphere in a ball of fire, was a ship. Its design was similar to Zara's scout vessel, but larger, more imposing. "A Sentinel-class interceptor," Zara said, her voice tight with fear. "They're not here to rescue. They're here to eliminate any trace of my mission." Jake's hand found Zara's, squeezing it reassuringly. "They won't find us," he said with more confidence than he felt. "And even if they do, we'll face them together. All of us." Grax nodded, his exoskeleton wearing as he shifted into a defensive stance. "The human speaks truth. You are under our protection now, Zara of the Novanians. We may be few, but we will not surrender easily." As the Novanian ship touched down near the site of Zara's crash, Jake felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. Here they were, a ragtag group of misfits, a stranded human, a rogue alien scout, and a band of reformed space pirates, about to face off against an advanced alien civilization. The odds were stacked against them, but Jake couldn't help but feel a spark of hope. They had come this far together, overcoming crash landings, hostile environments, and their own prejudices. Whatever came next, they would face it as one. As they retreated deeper into the caves, preparing for the possibility of discovery, Jake's mind was already working on a plan. They couldn't hide forever, and the secret Zara carried was too important to be buried. Somehow, they needed to find a way not just to survive, but to get off this planet and complete Zara's mission. The journey that had begun with a chance encounter in the aftermath of a crash was about to become something much bigger. A quest that could reshape the very fabric of galactic society. And as Jake looked at his unlikely companions, Zara with her determined gaze, Grax and his Krax crew with their imposing yet loyal presence, he knew that there was no other group he'd rather have by his side. The pursuit had begun, but so too had their true adventure escape and evasion. The caves echoed with the sound of distant footsteps and muffled voices. Jake, Zara, and the Krax had retreated to the deepest part of the cave system, a vast chamber filled with towering stalagmites and deep, shadowy crevices. The bioluminescent fungi cast an eerie blue glow over everything, making the scene feel almost otherworldly. Jake crouched behind a large rock formation, his makeshift weapon, a metal pipe salvaged from the wreckage, clutched tightly in his hands. Beside him, Zara's eyes were closed, her feather-like sensory crests twitching as she concentrated. "What do you hear?" Jake whispered. Zara's eyes opened, all three of them filled with worry. "They're methodical," she said softly, checking every tunnel, every crevice. "They know we're here somewhere." Grax, his bulky exoskeleton somehow managing to be surprisingly quiet, joined them. "My scouts report they've breached the outer defenses," the Krax leader rumbled. "It's only a matter of time before they find us here." Jake's mind raced. They couldn't stay here, waiting to be found like rats in a trap. But they couldn't leave the caves either. Outside, they'd be exposed, easy targets for the Novanian ship's advanced weaponry. "We need a distraction," Jake said, an idea forming. "Something to draw them away, give us a chance to slip past them." Zara looked at him, her alien features creased with concern. "What did you have in mind?" Jake grinned, a hint of mischief in his eyes. How good are the Krax at making noise? The plan came together quickly. The Krax, with their multiple limbs and heavy exoskeletons, were perfect for creating a cacophony of sound. They would stage a noisy retreat, through one of the side tunnels, making it seem like a large group was trying to escape. Meanwhile, Jake, Zara, and a small group of cracks would use the distraction to make their way to the cave entrance. If they timed it right, they might be able to slip past the Novanian search parties and make it to the cracks' ship. It's risky, Grax rumbled, his exoskeleton whirring as he considered the plan. If they don't fall for it, we'll be split up and vulnerable. Jake nodded grimly. True, but if we stay here, we're sitting ducks. At least this way, we have a chance. Zara placed a hand on Jake's arm, her touch surprisingly warm. I agree with Jake, she said. It's our best option. With the decision made, they put the plan into action. The main group of cracks moved to the far side of the chamber, ready to begin their noisy diversion. Jake, Zara, and 3 of the stealthier cracks prepared to make their move. Ready? Jake asked, looking at each of his companions in turn. Zara nodded, her eyes shining with determination. The cracks clicked their agreement. All right then, Jake said, taking a deep breath. Let's do this. At Jake's signal, the main cracks group burst into action. The cave suddenly filled with a cacophony of sound, the clanging of metal on rock, the whirring of exoskeletons pushed to their limits, and the booming voices of the cracks shouting in their native language. The noise was deafening, echoing through the tunnels and reverberating off the cave walls. Jake winced at the volume, but couldn't help but be impressed. If he didn't know better, he'd swear there was an entire army on the move. They waited for a few tense moments, listening as the sounds of the Novanian search party changed. Shouts of alarm in an alien language, the pounding of feet on stone, the diversion was working. Now, Jake whispered, and the small group began to move. They crept through the twisting tunnels, every sense on high alert. Jake's heart pounded in his chest, so loud he was sure the others must be able to hear it. Zara moved with a fluid grace, her eyes constantly scanning for danger. The cracks, despite their bulky appearance, managed to move with surprising stealth. As they neared the cave entrance, Jake held up a hand, signaling the group to stop. Ahead, he could hear voices, Novanian soldiers, discussing their next move. They were trapped between the search party and freedom. Jake exchanged a glance with Zara, seeing his own mix of fear and determination mirrored in her alien eyes. They couldn't turn back now. It was all or nothing. Taking a deep breath, Jake stepped out into the open, his hands raised. Hey there, he called out, trying to keep his voice steady. Looking for someone. The reaction was immediate. 3 Novanian soldiers spun to face him, their weapons raised. They were similar in appearance to Zara, but their features were harder, more militant. Their eyes widened in surprise at the sight of a human. Don't shoot, Jake said quickly. I'm unarmed. I just want to talk. One of the Novanians, clearly the leader, stepped forward. Who are you? He demanded. Where is the fugitive Zara? Jake shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant. Zara? Never heard of her. I'm just a stranded explorer. Been stuck on this rock for months. Sure would appreciate a lift-off planet, though. The Novanian leader's eyes narrowed in suspicion. You expect us to believe. His words were cut off as Zara and the cracks burst from hiding. In a flurry of movement, they overwhelmed the surprised Novanians. Jake dove into the fray, using his makeshift weapon to knock the leader's gun aside. The fight was brief but intense. The Novanians were skilled warriors, but they were outnumbered and caught off guard. Within moments, they were subdued, bound with makeshift restraints. Nice distraction, Zara said to Jake, a hint of admiration in her voice. Jake grinned, his heart still racing from the adrenaline. Thanks. Figured they wouldn't shoot first and ask questions later if a human popped up. They quickly gathered the Novanians' weapons and communication devices. As Zara examined one of the devices, her expression grew grave. We don't have much time, she said. They're calling for backup. The ship will be here soon. Jake nodded grimly. Then we better move. Grax and the others. One of the cracks spoke up, his translated voice tinged with worry. No word. We must assume they're still evading the search parties. Jake's jaw clenched. He hated the idea of leaving anyone behind, but they had no choice. We'll have to trust them to make it back to the rendezvous point. Right now, we need to focus on getting to the ship. They emerged from the cave into the harsh light of day. The twin suns beat down mercilessly, a stark contrast to the cool darkness they'd left behind. In the distance, Jake could see the Cracks ship, still partially disassembled from their repair efforts. "Can we fly it?" he asked, glancing at Zara. She bit her lip, considering. Maybe. If we can get the main systems online, we might be able to achieve orbit. But it won't be pretty. A high-pitched whine filled the air, growing louder by the second. Jake looked up to see the Novanian ship descending rapidly, its weapons already powering up. "Guess we don't have a choice," Jake said grimly. "Run." They sprinted across the open ground, painfully exposed. Energy blasts from the Novanian ship scorched the earth around them, kicking up plumes of dust and debris. Jake's lungs burned, his legs aching from the effort, but he pushed on. They reached the Cracks ship just as another volley of energy blasts tore up the ground behind them. Jake practically threw himself up the boarding ramp, turning to help Zara and the others aboard. Inside, it was chaos. The Cracks moved with frantic efficiency, their multiple limbs a blur as they worked to bring the ship's systems online. Zara rushed to the control panel, her hands dancing over the alien interface. Come on, Jake muttered, watching anxiously as status indicators flickered to life. The ship shuddered as a blast from the Novanian vessel struck its hull. Alarms blared, adding to the cacophony. "We've got partial power," Zara shouted over the noise. "It's not much, but it might be enough tow." Her words were cut off as the ship suddenly lurched upward. Jake was thrown off his feet, crashing into a bulkhead. Through the view screen, he could see the ground falling away rapidly. They were airborne, but far from safe. The Novanian ship loomed above them, its weapons locked. Jake exchanged a glance with Zara, seeing his own mix of fear and determination mirrored in her alien eyes. They couldn't turn back now. It was all or nothing. Taking a deep breath, Jake stepped out into the open, his hands raised. "Hey there," he called out, trying to keep his voice steady. "Looking for someone." The reaction was immediate. 3 Novanian soldiers spun to face him, their weapons raised. They were similar in appearance to Zara, but their features were harder, more militant. Their eyes widened in surprise at the sight of a human. "Don't shoot," Jake said quickly. "I'm unarmed. I just want to talk." One of the Novanians, clearly the leader, stepped forward. "Who are you?" he demanded. "Where is the fugitive Zara?" Jake shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant. "Zara? Never heard of her. I'm just a stranded explorer. Been stuck on this rock for months. Sure would appreciate a lift off planet, though." The Novanian leader's eyes narrowed in suspicion. "You expect us to believe?" His words were cut off as Zara and the Cracks burst from hiding. In a flurry of movement, they overwhelmed the surprised Novanians. Jake dove into the fray, using his makeshift weapon to knock the leader's gun aside. The fight was brief but intense. The Novanians were skilled warriors, but they were outnumbered and caught off guard. Within moments, they were subdued, bound with makeshift restraints. "Nice distraction," Zara said to Jake, a hint of admiration in her voice. Jake grinned, his heart still racing from the adrenaline. "Thanks. Figured they wouldn't shoot first and ask questions later if a human popped up." They quickly gathered the Novanians' weapons and communication devices. As Zara examined one of the devices, her expression grew grave. "We don't have much time," she said. "They're calling for backup. The ship will be here soon." Jake nodded grimly. "Then we better move. Cracks and the others." One of the Cracks spoke up, his translated voice tinged with worry. "No word. We must assume they're still evading the search parties." Jake's jaw clenched. He hated the idea of leaving anyone behind, but they had no choice. "We'll have to trust them to make it back to the rendezvous point. Right now, we need to focus on getting to the ship." They emerged from the cave into the harsh light of day. The twin suns beat down mercilessly, a stark contrast to the cool darkness they'd left behind. In the distance, Jake could see the Cracks ship, still partially disassembled from their repair efforts. "Can we fly it?" he asked, glancing at Zara. She bit her lip, considering. "Maybe. If we can get the main systems online, we might be able to achieve orbit, but it won't be pretty." A high-pitched whine filled the air, growing louder by the second. Jake looked up to see the Novanian ship descending rapidly, its weapons already powering up. "Guess we don't have a choice," Jake said grimly. "Run." They sprinted across the open ground, painfully exposed. Energy blasts from the Novanian ship scorched the earth around them, kicking up plumes of dust and debris. Jake's lungs burned, his legs aching from the effort, but he pushed on. They reached the Cracks ship just as another volley of energy blasts tore up the ground behind them. Jake practically threw himself up the boarding ramp, turning to help Zara and the others aboard. Inside, it was chaos. The Cracks moved with frantic efficiency, their multiple limbs a blur as they worked to bring the ship's systems online. Zara rushed to the control panel, her hands dancing over the alien interface. The days that followed their daring escape blurred together in a haze of hyperspace travel and frantic preparation. Jake found himself constantly amazed by the resilience and ingenuity of his alien companions. The Cracks worked tirelessly to repair and upgrade their ship, while Zara pored over star charts and ancient legends, searching for clues to the location of the hidden civilization. As for Jake, he threw himself into the role of jack-of-all-trades, helping wherever he could. His unique human perspective often provided solutions that the others might have overlooked. It was a crash course in xenotechnology and interstellar politics, and Jake absorbed every bit of knowledge he could. One cycle, as they had taken to calling the ship's artificial day-night rhythm, Jake found Zara in the makeshift lab they had set up, surrounded by holographic displays and scattered data pads. Her feather-like sensory crests were twitching rapidly, a sign Jake had come to recognize as deep concentration or stress. "Any luck?" he asked, sliding into a seat beside her. Zara's 3 eyes blinked in rapid succession as she refocused on her surroundings. "Maybe," she said, her melodic voice tinged with excitement. "I've been cross-referencing old Novanian myths with recent stellar anomaly reports. There's a system on the edge of the Veiled Nebula that matches the description in the ancient texts." Jake leaned in, studying the star chart she had pulled up. "That's pretty far out there," he mused. "No wonder they stayed hidden for so long." Zara nodded. The nebula's radiation would mask most conventional scans. It's the perfect hiding place for an advanced civilization that doesn't want to be found. Before Jake could respond, Grax's voice boomed over the ship's intercom. "All hands to the bridge. We've got company." Jake and Zara exchanged a worried glance before rushing to the bridge. When they arrived, they found Grax and the other Cracks clustered around the main view screen. The image showed a sleek, predatory-looking ship rapidly approaching their position. "Novanian?" Jake asked, though he already knew the answer. Grax nodded grimly. "A Nexus-class battlecruiser. They must have predicted our course." Zara's face paled. "That's one of our most advanced warships. We can't outrun it, and we certainly can't outgun it." Jake's mind raced. They were so close to their goal, they couldn't fail now. "What about the cloaking device?" he suggested. "Could we use it again?" Zara shook her head. "They'll be expecting that trick, and the device is barely functional after our last escape. Using it again could burn it out completely." The bridge fell silent as the gravity of their situation sank in. They were outmatched, cornered, with nowhere left to run. Jake looked at his companions, seeing the same mix of fear and determination in their eyes that he felt in his own heart. Suddenly, an idea struck him. It was risky, possibly suicidal, but it might just work. "What if we surrender?" Jake said. The others looked at him as if he had lost his mind. "Have you gone mad, human?" Grax rumbled. "After everything we've been through." Jake held up his hands. "Hear me out. We surrender, let them bring us aboard. But we do it on our terms. We can hide a small team in a shielded compartment. Maybe use some of that crack stealth tech you guys are so proud of. While they're focused on the main group, the hidden team can make their way to the engine room and sabotage the ship." Zara's eyes widened as she caught on to his plan. "If we can disable their engines, we might have a chance to escape and make it to the hidden planet." Grax stroked his chin thoughtfully, his exoskeleton whirring softly. "It's risky, very risky, but it might be our only chance." They quickly hashed out the details of the plan. Zara, with her knowledge of Novanian ship layouts, would lead the sabotage team. 2 of the stealthiest cracks would accompany her, Jake, Grax, and the rest of the crew would act as the distraction, surrendering themselves to the Novanians. As they made their final preparations, Jake pulled Zara aside. "Be careful in there," he said softly. "I've grown kind of fond of having you around." Zara's skin flushed a deeper shade of lavender, her sensory crests rippling gently. "I'll come back for you," she promised. "All of you. We're in this together, remember." Jake nodded, feeling a lump form in his throat. He wanted to say more, but there was no time. The Novanian ship was hailing them, demanding their immediate surrender. With one last shared look of determination, they put their plan into action. Jake watched as Zara and her team sealed themselves into a hidden compartment, their life signs masked by salvaged Crax technology. Then, taking a deep breath, he opened a channel to the Novanian ship. "This is Jake Morrison of Earth," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "We surrender. Please don't fire." The next few moments were a blur of activity. The Novanian ship extended a docking tube, and heavily armed soldiers poured into their vessel. Jake and the others were roughly detained, their hands bound behind their backs with energy cuffs. As they were marched onto the Novanian ship, Jake couldn't help but marvel at its interior. It was a far cry from the cobbled-together Crax vessel they had been calling home. Everything was sleek, efficient, and humming with advanced technology. They were brought to the bridge, where a stern-looking Novanian commander awaited them. His gaze swept over the motley crew, lingering on Jake with obvious curiosity. "A human," the commander mused. "How unexpected. I am Commander Vex of the Novanian Stellar Force. You will tell me everything you know about the fugitive Zara and her mission." Jake met the commander's gaze steadily. "I'm afraid I don't know much," he said, feigning ignorance. "We're just a group of lost travelers who picked up a distress signal. We had no idea we were harboring a fugitive." Vex's eyes narrowed. "Do not lie to me, human. We know Zara was with you. Where is she hiding?" Jake shrugged as best he could with his hands bound. "Search the ship if you want. We've got nothing to hide." As Vex barked orders to his crew to begin a thorough search of the Crax vessel, Jake silently prayed that Zara and her team had made it safely aboard. Everything hinged on them now. The minutes crawled by with excruciating slowness. Jake and the others were subjected to intense questioning, but they stuck to their story. They were just simple travelers, caught up in something they didn't understand. Jake could see the frustration growing in Vex's eyes with each passing moment. Suddenly, the ship shuddered violently. Alarms began to blare, and the bridge erupted into chaos. "What's happening?" Vex demanded, rounding on his crew. "Sir, we've lost power to the main engines," a frantic officer reported, and there are intruders reported in engineering. Jake couldn't help the small smile that crept onto his face. Zara had done it. Vex's eyes widened in realization, then narrowed in fury as he turned back to Jake. "You," he snarled. "This was your plan all along." Before Jake could respond, the ship rocked again, more violently this time. The lights flickered and died, plunging the bridge into darkness. In the confusion that followed, Jake felt someone grab his arm. "Time to go," Zara's voice whispered in his ear. Somehow, in the darkness and chaos, they managed to free themselves and the rest of their crew. They fought their way back to the docking tube, Zara leading the way with an uncanny sense of direction. As they raced back onto their own ship, Jake could hear the sounds of pursuit behind them. Grax and the other cracks laid down covering fire, buying them precious seconds to disengage from the Novanian vessel. "Get us out of here," Jake shouted as they sealed the airlock. The engines roared to life, and they shot away from the disabled Novanian ship. On the viewscreen, Jake could see other Novanian vessels converging on their position, but they were too late. With a flash of light, their ship jumped to hyperspace, leaving their pursuers far behind. As the adrenaline of their escape began to fade, Jake looked around at his companions. They were battered, exhausted, but alive, and more importantly, they were still free. Zara approached him, a weary smile on her face. "We did it," she said softly. "We're on course for the hidden planet. We should arrive within a few cycles." Jake nodded, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. They had overcome incredible odds to get this far, but he knew that the greatest challenge still lay ahead. They were about to make first contact with an unknown civilization, one that could potentially reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. As he looked out at the swirling vortex of hyperspace, Jake couldn't help but feel a sense of awe at the journey that had brought him here. From a stranded explorer on a desolate planet to a key player in a mission that could change the course of galactic history, it was almost too much to comprehend. But as he felt Zara's hand slip into his, saw Grax and the other cracks gathered around the bridge with looks of determination on their faces, Jake knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. They had become more than just allies or friends. They were a family, forged in the crucible of adversity and united by a common purpose. The final confrontation with the Novanians was behind them, but Jake had a feeling that their greatest adventure was just beginning. As their ship hurtled through hyperspace towards the hidden planet, he allowed himself a moment of hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, they could usher in a new era of understanding and cooperation between the diverse species of the galaxy. Whatever the future held, Jake knew one thing for certain: he was exactly where he was meant to be. Come on," Jake muttered, watching anxiously as status indicators flickered to life. The ship shuddered as a blast from the Novanian vessel struck its hull. Alarms blared, adding to the cacophony. "We've got partial power," Zara shouted over the noise. "It's not much, but it might be enough tow." Her words were cut off as the ship suddenly lurched upward. Jake was thrown off his feet, crashing into a bulkhead. Through the viewscreen, he could see the ground falling away rapidly. They were airborne, but far from safe. The Novanian ship loomed above them, its weapons locked. New beginnings. The ship emerged from hyperspace with a flash of light, the swirling vortex giving way to a breathtaking vista of stars. Before them loomed a massive nebula, its vibrant colors painting the void in shades of purple, blue, and green. And there, nestled within the cosmic cloud, was a planet. Jake leaned forward, his eyes wide with wonder. "Is that it?" he breathed. Zara nodded, her 3 eyes fixed on the viewscreen. "Yes," she said softly. "The hidden world. We found it." As they drew closer, details began to emerge. The planet was a vibrant blue-green sphere, swathed in white clouds. Continents of rich emerald and golden hues peeked through the atmosphere. It looked, Jake thought with a pang of homesickness, not unlike Earth. "I'm detecting multiple artificial structures on the surface," one of the cracks announced from the sensor station, "and energy readings unlike anything I've ever seen." Grax rumbled thoughtfully. "An advanced civilization indeed. How do we proceed?" All eyes turned to Zara. This had been her mission from the start, her dream of making first contact. She took a deep breath, her feather-like sensory crests quivering with a mix of excitement and apprehension. "We broadcast a message," she said. "On all frequencies, we let them know we come in peace, seeking knowledge and friendship." Jake nodded, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Sounds like a plan. Want me to do the talking? I've got experience being the alien after all." Zara smiled gratefully. "Perhaps we should both speak. Show them that different species can work together." As they prepared the message, Jake couldn't help but feel a sense of déjà vu. How many times had he imagined this scenario in his youth, dreaming of first contact? But the reality was far more complex, more fraught with danger and possibility than he could have ever imagined. They sent the message, their words of peace and friendship echoing out across the vast distances of space. Then they waited. Minutes stretched into hours. The crew took turns at the comm station, listening for any response. Jake found himself pacing the bridge, too keyed up to sit still. Zara meditated in a corner, her eyes closed in concentration. Grax and the other cracks busied themselves with ship maintenance, their movements betraying their own nervous energy. Just as Jake was beginning to fear they had come all this way for nothing, the comm system crackled to life. A voice unlike any Jake had ever heard filled the bridge. It was melodious yet alien, seeming to resonate on multiple frequencies at once. The universal translator struggled for a moment before rendering the words into something they could understand. "Greetings, travelers from beyond the veil. We have heard your call and welcome you in peace. You may approach." A cheer went up from the crew. They had done it, made first contact with a civilization that had remained hidden for who knew how long. As they entered the planet's atmosphere, following the landing coordinates provided by their new hosts, Jake marveled at the sights below. Cities unlike any he had ever seen spread across the landscape, organic structures that seemed to grow from the earth itself, shimmering with an inner light. They sat down in a vast plaza, smooth and iridescent like the inside of a seashell. As the boarding ramp lowered, Jake took a deep breath of alien air. It was sweet and crisp, tinged with unfamiliar scents. "Ready?" he asked, glancing at his companions. Zara nodded, her eyes shining with barely contained excitement. Grax rumbled his assent, his exoskeleton gleaming in the planet's golden sunlight. Together, this unlikely band of explorers, human, Novanian, and Cracks, stepped out to meet their hosts. The beings that awaited them were unlike anything Jake had ever seen or imagined. They were tall and slender, their bodies seeming to shimmer and shift like living light. Multiple limbs, Jake couldn't quite count how many, moved with fluid grace. Their faces, if they could be called that, were as swirling patterns of luminescence. One of the beings stepped forward, its body pulsing with gentle colors. When it spoke, Jake felt the words as much as heard them. "Welcome to Luminara," the being said. "I am Scythril, emissary of the Lumini. We have long awaited this day." Zara stepped forward, bowing deeply. "We are honored to be here," she said. "I am Zora of the Novanians. With me are Jake of Earth and Grax of the Cracks. We come seeking knowledge and friendship." Scythril's body shimmered with what Jake interpreted as pleasure. "And you shall have both," the Lumini said. "Come, there is much to discuss." What followed was a whirlwind of discovery and revelation. The Lumini, it turned out, were an ancient race. They had achieved interstellar travel eons ago, but had chosen to retreat from the wider galaxy, focusing instead on inner growth and the development of what they called psychic technologies. They led Jake and his companions through their city, each new site more wondrous than the last. Buildings that responded to thought, vehicles that moved without any visible means of propulsion, and gardens that sang with colors Jake had never even imagined. But it was in the Hall of Histories that the true purpose of their journey became clear. Scythril guided them to a vast chamber, its walls covered in shifting murals that seemed to tell the story of the galaxy itself. "We have watched and waited," the Lumini said. "We have seen the rise and fall of empires, the birth and death of stars, and we have seen the potential for both great good and terrible destruction in the younger races." The murals shifted, showing scenes of conflict, wars between species Jake recognized and many he didn't, but it also showed moments of cooperation, of different races coming together to achieve wonders. "The galaxy stands at a crossroads," Scythril continued. "The Novanian attempt to keep us hidden was well-intentioned but misguided. The time has come for us to rejoin the galactic community, to share our knowledge and to learn from others in turn." Jake felt a weight settle on his shoulders, They had come seeking first contact, but what they had found was so much more. This wasn't just about one hidden civilization, it was about the future of the entire galaxy. But why us? Jake asked. Why trust us with this? Sci-Fi's body pulsed with warm colors. Because you have shown us what is possible. A human, a Novanian, and the Cracks, former enemies, now working together in harmony. You are living proof that cooperation between diverse species is not only possible but powerful. Zara stepped forward, her voice filled with emotion. We will carry your message to the galaxy, she said. We will show them what we have seen here. Grax rumbled in agreement. The Cracks will stand with you. We have seen the error of our old ways. It is time for a new path. Jake nodded, feeling a sense of purpose unlike anything he had ever known. Earth is still new to the galactic stage, he said, but we're quick learners. We'll do our part to build this new future. The days that followed were a blur of activity. The Lumini shared their advanced technology, helping to upgrade the Cracks ship for the journey ahead. Zara worked tirelessly to compile all they had learned, preparing the message they would carry to the galaxy. As for Jake, he found himself in the role of diplomat, bridging the gap between the enigmatic Lumini and his more familiar companions. It was a role he never would have imagined for himself, but one he found he was uniquely suited for. Finally, the day of departure arrived. As they prepared to board their ship, Haxithril approached them one last time. You carry with you the hopes of many, the Lumini said. The road ahead will not be easy. There will be those who resist change, who fear the unknown. But remember this moment, this unity you have forged. It is the key to the future. With final farewells and promises to return, Jake and his companions boarded their ship. As they lifted off, rising through the golden skies of Luminara, Jake felt a mix of sadness and anticipation. They were leaving behind a world of wonders, but they were carrying its promise with them. In the days and weeks that followed, as they made their way back through known space, they began to spread their message. At each stop, each encounter with other ships or stations, they shared what they had learned. The response was varied. Some reacted with fear or disbelief, others with excitement and hope. The Novanian government, predictably, was less than pleased. But as news of the Lumini spread, as more and more people heard their story, a change began to take hold. It wasn't easy. There were close calls, threats, and moments when it all seemed hopeless. But slowly, surely, the tide began to turn. Species that had been at war for generations began to talk. Trade routes opened up. Cultural exchanges flourished. And at the center of it all was the unlikely crew of their small ship. Jake, the human explorer who had found a home among the stars. Zora, the Novanian scout who had risked everything for her beliefs. Grax and his Cracks, pirates turned peacekeepers. They had become symbols of what was possible when different species worked together. One cycle, as they sat in the ship's common area, enjoying a rare moment of quiet, Jake looked around at his companions, his friends, his family. You know, he said, a smile playing on his lips, when I crashed on that desolate planet all those months ago, I never could have imagined all this. Zora's sensory crests rippled with amusement, nor I, when I found a strange human caring for me in the wreckage of my ship. Grax rumbled a laugh, and who would have thought former Cracks pirates would be at the forefront of galactic peace? They all shared a chuckle at that. Then Zora's expression turned more serious. We've come so far, she said softly, but there's still so much to do. Jake nodded, reaching out to take her hand. True, but we're not alone anymore. We've got each other, and now we've got a whole galaxy of allies. As their ship cruised through the star-studded void, carrying them towards their next adventure, Jake felt a profound sense of belonging. He had found his place in the universe, not just as a human, but as part of something greater, a union of diverse species, working together to forge a brighter future for all. The journey that had begun with a chance encounter on a desolate world had led to the dawn of a new era for the entire galaxy. And as Jake looked out at the endless expanse of space, he knew that their greatest adventures were still to come. The end was just the beginning.